about it with that, but the only thing that was strange about that whole thing was that there was a point in time when Bruce and I had the same girlfriend, you know, and it was kind of sit back and wait on, okay, is she gonna end up marrying Bruce, or is she gonna be my girlfriend, or what, you know? That's the only thing that was ever a strange situation. Other than that, I mean, I had a great time, you know.
In December, Springsteen travelled to Los Angeles to visit his parents, who had moved there several years before. He celebrated Christmas here and thought long and hard about his future. The following year would herald many changes. When Bruce returned from California in 1971, he shocked friends and bandmates alike by informing them that Steel Mill was over. Having seen Van Morrison play, he had new influences, and these could not be developed within the confines of a hard rock band.
After Steel Mill broke up, Bruce already had a plan. In fact, the reason they broke up is because he had a plan. It wasn't haphazard at all. When he came back from California, from what I remember talking to him about it, was that he had seen Van Morrison's band in San Francisco and was very impressed. And that was when Van Morrison had the big band with the horns and the girl singers. And he thought, hey, I need to try something like this. And so he did. And that was the whole reason that the Steel Mill was broken up. He basically just told everybody, look, I'm done with this. I'm going to start something new. You know, if you want, you know, if you want to join along with me, you can, and if you don't have to.
Yeah, it was a musical change, yeah, to go from where we were in Steel Mill to go to this whole other R&B more thing. You know, because Steel Mill wasn't that. Steel Mill was heavy rock, jazz, what have you stuff, whatever was there. And that's the only reason he wanted to change. He wanted to do something different. You know, and you know, everybody talks about the Asbury sound. Well, there's the beginning of it. The change from Steel Mill to that band with the horns. Nobody did that before. You know, everybody had a sax player maybe, but nobody had a little horn section. You know, but there again, there's other influences. Van Morrison, you know, the horn sections, you know, here and that. You know, Bruce wanted to go maybe more in that direction.
And Vinny, of course, was going to stay. Vinny was always Bruce's main drummer. He was like his big brother. Vinny was like Bruce's, what would you say, his protector, his bodyguard, his big brother. He always watched out for Bruce, you know. Well, he didn't call it the Bruce Springsteen Band. In fact, he just called it the Big Band. They didn't know what to call it because, you know, Steel Mill had a connotation of being a loud, crunching metal guitar band. And this was going to be lighter, more of a soul band. And, you know, they tossed around some silly names. And finally, one day, I don't know where we were, Steve and I both said, look, Bruce, why don't you just call it, give it your name. You know, it's your band. You're writing the tunes. You came up with the idea. It's your arrangements. And he said, well, you know, I don't know. That's kind of an ego trip, isn't it? And we said, no, man, you do it. Believe us, it'll work. And so that's why, for lack of a better name, he called it the Bruce Springsteen Band. But it was mostly through the encouragement of the people in the band.
Despite the participation of the majority of Steel Mill and its entourage in the Bruce Springsteen Band, some chose not to continue the journey.
I'm going to defend him. He was bored with what he was doing. He wasn't happy with it. And I think that everybody's influenced by people, whether they like it or not, or they want to admit it or not, is another thing. People are influenced by other people around them. Their peers tend to influence them. And at that time, Leon Russell, Joe Cocker, big deal. They were doing great. And it was an incredibly full, good thing. It was arranged well. It cooked. Okay? So when he did the 10-piece band, all that went through my mind was, if you have 10 people, how are we going to book this on the level we're on? Because if we get $2,000 a night, that's $200 gross per individual. You're not going to have any support group because you can't afford to, I can't afford to just pay the gas and the guys to help move all the stuff. How are you going to put them up in a hotel room? With a 4-piece band, I could find people that would put us up. You know, we could go, we had no overhead, none, okay? Well, when you're doing something in a gestation type stage, you have to do it with no money. The things we did with no money, sure, it was hard. It wasn't easy. But we didn't have any debts. Everything came in, everybody kept. But when the 10-piece band came, I didn't resign. I just looked at the economics of the whole thing and said, forget it.
Although Bruce was now without a manager, he continued to improvise with his Asbury Park colleagues. In May, the most bizarre collective emerged, Dr. Zoom and the Sonic Boom.
Well, Dr. Zoom, we had everybody we knew in the band. You know, 2 of everything. 2 drummers, 2 basses, 2 guitars, 2 singers, 2 this, baton twirlers, ringmaster, 2 Monopoly players. You know, Big Danny and Big Tiny played Monopoly.
We just put it all together and had some fun. You know, it was basically taking the feel of the upstage club and bringing it out into a concert setting, and on a large scale. And it was the jam, the idea of the big jam of friends doing a concert, and we had the best time. It was so much fun.
No matter how fruitful these bands may have been, Springsteen seemed to be treading water, and once again Tinker West became involved.
They bopped around here and they did this and that. They weren't doing anything. And I had a friend of mine named Pat Carwin. Pat knew these guys from the part that had something to do with the Partridge Family at the time, which was a big deal then. Jim Creticus, who was a hell of a nice guy, and Mike Appel. And he said that, I said, you know, if Bruce is going nowhere, I said, he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll set you up with these guys. Took Bruce up there and sat him down with just an acoustic guitar, and that same guitar, by the way, is still upstairs in my bedroom because I didn't have a good Martin D28. I did. So I loaned him the guitar and he played, and they immediately realized this guy can write songs because they were both songwriters.
By February 1972, Springsteen was signed into a long-term deal with Appel and Creticos's company Laurel Canyon. They took him to John Hammond of CBS Records, who had famously signed Bob Dylan. He offered Bruce a 10-album deal. Both Appel and Creticos saw Springsteen as a solo performer, and with the stamped approval of Hammond, Springsteen was immediately promoted and marketed as a successor to Bob Dylan's crown. These comparisons would be both productive and restrictive.
While I was smart enough not to take the Dylan comparisons literally, that doesn't mean they had no effect on me whatsoever, and I knew what that was about. It was about people who weren't as good as Bob Dylan. You know, even though several of the others, Loudon Wainwright and John Prine, ended up being favorite artists of mine. It took them a while to get going. And the same's true with Springsteen.
Springsteen is Springsteen. I mean, you can't say that with these record companies, they always do this. Oh, he's the next this or the next that. Bullshit. He's him. And by the way, the history will bear that out. He is him. He's not Bob Dylan. I mean, I said he would be bigger than Bob Dylan. I told him that, but that doesn't mean he's going to be Bob Dylan. He's got that ability to project himself and the ability to write great songs, and he's a tremendous live performer. What can you say?
It's not just CBS that was pushing the Bob Dylan comparisons. The Bob Dylan comparisons were a ready-made journalistic hook for anybody at a time when, you have to remember, Dylan himself was in considerable seclusion. He wasn't performing, his records were coming out irregularly, he was about to break with Columbia for a little while, and people were very concerned about his disappearance. So the search for a new one was a